They say history is written by the winners, but in the music industry, history is often erased by power, and no story reveals that more chillingly than what happened to Blu Cantrell. Once on the cusp of R&B superstardom, Blu's name is now barely whispered, a ghost in the margins of the genre she once helped define. But what if her disappearance wasn't just a matter of faded fame? What if Blu Cantrell got too close to something or someone she was never supposed to? Because when you start to connect the dots between Blu Cantrell, Jay-Z, and a child named Blue Ivy, the narrative stops sounding like a conspiracy theory and starts feeling like a cover-up. This is the story of how one woman went from the charts to complete erasure, and why some believe she was silenced to protect the most powerful couple in music. Blu Cantrell was never just a one-hit wonder. Born Tiffany Cobb, she spent years grinding behind the scenes, singing backup for major stars before finally landing her own deal. When her debut album So Blue dropped in 2001, it was an instant success. The single Hit 'em Up style Oops became a radio monster, and Blu was suddenly everywhere. Grammy nominations, magazine covers, late-night performances. She had the voice, the range, and the charisma. By every metric, Blu was that girl. And then, she vanished. Right around the peak of Blu's ascent, something shifted. Whispers in the industry grew louder. Blu was getting close to Jay-Z. Not just industry close, but romantically close. They were seen at the same events, whispered to have gone on private trips, and according to insiders, the chemistry was undeniable. In a now infamous interview, Wendy Williams asked Blu point-blank if she had ever kissed Jay-Z.
Have you ever kissed Jay-Z romantically?
No. No, I can't answer that.
Oh, she's touching him off the neck! Look! You see?
Why do people not want to let the Jay-Z Blu Cantrell thing go?
Blu didn't confirm, but she didn't deny it either. Her coy smile and nervous giggle said everything. At that time, Jay-Z was aligning himself with Beyoncé, who was preparing to launch her solo career. The optics were crucial. A relationship with Blu, older and outspoken, could have complicated things. Beyoncé was younger, poised, and according to Blu herself in a later interview, easier to control. Blu said, "At the end of the day, a younger, less savvy to the world type of woman is what he wanted." Her words didn't feel like shade. They felt like a warning, and the industry began to shift. Blu's second album, Bittersweet, dropped in 2003. It even earned another Grammy nomination. But something was wrong. The label barely promoted it. Tours were cut short. Suddenly, Blu's momentum was gone. Her contract quietly wasn't renewed. She was out, just like that. The industry's favorite trick. Blu wasn't the only one. Fans started noticing a trend. Women who got too close to Jay-Z, professionally or personally, tended to disappear. Tiara Mari, once the crown jewel of Rockefeller's new wave, was allegedly blackballed after rumors surfaced that Beyoncé didn't like how close she had gotten to Jay. Maya, a massive R&B star in the late 90s and early 2000s, faded from the mainstream right as Beyoncé's solo career took off. And then there was Aaliyah, perhaps the biggest rising threat to Beyoncé's reign, whose tragic 2001 death left a vacuum that Destiny's Child would soon fill. Jaguar Wright, an industry insider turned whistleblower, calls it strategic erasure. Artists, especially women who pose a threat, are not just pushed aside, they're erased, removed from radio, silenced by NDAs, undermined with mental health narratives. Blu Cantrell, she claims, was one of the first major victims, and it wasn't just R&B. Look at Emile, Jay-Z's former Rockefeller protege, who disappeared after tensions rose. Look at Foxy Brown, who at one point was one of the most powerful women in rap. When their relationships with Jay soured, so did their careers. It's a pattern, and Blu fits it perfectly. Years after Blu disappeared, Beyoncé announced her pregnancy. The world celebrated. But then came The Interview, an Australian talk show in 2011, where Beyoncé's belly appeared to fold unnaturally as she sat down. The footage went viral. Was it a prosthetic? Was a surrogate involved? Suddenly, the rumors of a faked pregnancy caught fire. And then someone remembered Blu Cantrell, her name, her sudden disappearance, her rumored relationship with Jay-Z, and a shocking theory emerged that Blu had been pregnant with Jay-Z's child. And that child was Blue Ivy. At first it sounded ridiculous, but then the timelines matched. Blu vanished around 2004. Blue Ivy was born in 2012. In between, silence, no music, no press, nothing. Blu later gave interviews where she hinted at betrayal, coercion, even trauma. Some fans believe she was forced to give up the baby, or worse, forced to terminate the pregnancy. Others think she carried the child and was paid off or threatened into silence. What broke Blu, she said, wasn't the industry. It was what happened behind the scenes. In 2014, Blu resurfaced, but not in the way anyone expected. She was found running barefoot through the streets of Santa Monica at 2 a.m., screaming that someone was trying to poison her with gas. She was hospitalized for a psychiatric evaluation. The media painted her as unstable, but fans who had been following her story saw a pattern. Britney Spears, Kanye West, Martin Lawrence. When celebrities become inconvenient, the narrative turns to madness. Blue later said she wasn't having a breakdown, she was trying to escape. She claimed someone had tried to poison her, that she had been betrayed by her own lawyer, who was secretly working for Jay-Z's label during contract negotiations. That her career wasn't lost, it was stolen. If the Blue Ivy theory is even partially true, the implications are massive. It would mean Jay-Z fathered a child with Blu Cantrell, that Beyoncé's pregnancy was fake to maintain an image, that the most iconic child in hip-hop was born out of a lie. It would shatter the Carter brand, worth billions. It would recast Beyoncé not as a queen, but as a co-conspirator in silencing another woman. And Blu Cantrell, she'd no longer be a forgotten name. She'd be the missing chapter, the woman whose erasure was the cost of someone else's empire. Blue has started to talk again, quietly, carefully, but her interviews hint at deeper truths. Her story lines up with others who have been silenced, discarded, or discredited. As more documents emerge, as more insiders speak, the truth becomes harder to bury. Because if Blue was erased to protect a secret, then we have to ask, who else have they silenced? And who's next? This isn't just a story about a forgotten R&B singer. It's a blueprint for how power rewrites history. And the cracks in that narrative, they're starting to show. Behind every successful empire in music, there are casualties. Blu Cantrell isn't the only woman who may have been pushed aside to keep someone else's image intact, but she might be the most haunting, because her name lives on, in the name of the Carters' firstborn child. Is that coincidence? A tribute? Or something darker? A way to claim control of her legacy forever? If this is how power works, then the story of Blu Cantrell isn't over. It's just been buried, and now it's starting to resurface.
Blue, it's time to talk.